Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Conscious Corner with Annie and Courtney. I'm Courtney, and here with me today is my coaching queen, Annie Lieb. We're thrilled.
Hello, I was going to say nice to see everyone, but I guess they're just listening, unless I see them on YouTube at some point. But hi, good to see everyone and talk to everyone.
We are thrilled to have another incredible guest with us today. Joining us is John Schindler, co-founder, CEO of Liquet Medical Inc. He has 3 decades of experience in the medical device industry, from launching new products, dealing with clinical support, to product development. What I find super exciting, amongst many things about John, is that in his role as CEO of Liquet Medical, he's developed the Versus Catheter, a localized drug delivery catheter to treat blood clots in the lungs. And I met John through my husband, who used to work with John back when they worked for a medical device company by the name of Atrium. So I'm really excited about our conversation today because we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, which really affects so many professionals in a variety of fields, and something that I admit that I struggle with from time to time. John will discuss with us his personal experience with imposter syndrome and the strategies such as coaching, mindfulness, and mentorship that have helped him to overcome self-doubt, gain confidence, and find deeper enjoyment and peace in life. So John, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Certainly is.
Well,
Hi, John.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Big fan of both of you and listening to the podcast. And so I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So I'm really curious about how you came into your current role at Liquet. If you could just sort of take us more into what brought you into your current position.
Yeah. And so I think it's pretty rare in life really to have your career kind of come full circle. And what I mean by that is, when I was younger, and I think this is pertinent to the topic that we're talking about today. When I was much younger, I lost both my parents early in life. And so, ironically, both of them to blood-borne diseases, vascular diseases, illnesses. And so that kind of informed, as you can imagine, the trajectory of my career and what I was interested in ultimately as I got, worked my way through college and whatnot. And so, I found myself very attracted to really just kind of trying to understand what happened to them, I think, in some levels. And so, started off as a sales guy, as many people do in the med device space, and kind of worked my way up through the ranks in these companies, but really fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of very talented people. And what makes what I'm doing now specifically important to me is that, my mother passed away from a blood clot in her lungs, or pulmonary embolism, if you will. And what we're working on now is trying to find a way to better treat these patients. But that's Liquet's mission, is how do we find a way to personalize the way we treat these patients today, and not just treat everybody the same way, once they have this terrible condition that they're suffering from. And so I find it amazing and very fortunate to have an opportunity to potentially leave an impact in this environment with this particular device company that we're working on today. And so maybe I'll stop there. That's a good starting point, hey?
That's a great starting point. And in my eyes, you're like a real life superhero in the amazing work that you're doing, and how lucky so many people are that you are working on this particular device that's not only just a device, but you can personalize it to each individual's whatever's medically coming up for that individual. So really amazing. And so
that you went through these, I don't want to call them tragedies, but you lost your parents so early, and that you're able to have that experience and turn it in your life into something incredible for other people. You're truly giving back.
Yeah, I feel very passionate about that. So yeah, thanks for recognizing that. I appreciate that.
Sure, sure. So can you tell us about, like, you talked about sort of climbing the ranks, so to speak, in the industry. And in doing that, can you talk a little bit about, or a lot about, some of the challenges that you faced in making the transition from what it was you were doing to your current role?
Yeah. And so I think, anytime you set out to do something wholly different and new, that's in my mind the nidus for when imposter syndrome, if you want to call it that, rears its ugly head the most, right? And so certainly for me, I'm a first-time founder of a company. I have this holistic experience and background around vascular disease and innovation over the course of the last 30 years. And so I understand very well the processes involved and how to do it. But it's a wholly different thing when you strike out on your own and decide, okay, now it's for real. We're going to take a stab at this, and I may not know exactly where this is headed right from the start, right? But we're going to put these little things in place, and we'll do the best we can to manage based on the knowledge that we've got inherently. And then also leaning on the people around us, the ecosystem for innovation that surrounds us has just been a massive support system for us, if you will, to help us kind of understand where our gaps are. You tend to lose sight of the trees for the forest, if that's how, or the forest for the trees. Which, I don't know how that analogy is best used in this situation, but if you understand what I mean, it's
Yes.
and so being able to kind of get perspective on things to help you understand where your blind spots are, I think has been really, really useful to us.
So I just want to jump in, because let's just pretend that maybe somebody out there is listening and is like, I've heard of this imposter syndrome, but what is it? I don't know what they're talking about. So the definition of imposter syndrome, also called perceived fraudulence, involves feelings of self-doubt and personal incompetence that persist despite your education, experience, and accomplishments. To counter these feelings, you might end up working harder and holding yourself to ever higher standards. That's just one of the definitions that I've found. I think it's important to note, like, when people talk about stuff on podcasts and I don't know what they're talking about, but I've heard of it, I get kind of annoyed. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's on the same level and we all know what exactly we're talking about here. But thank you for bringing that up, because it's what you said about starting and putting yourself out there and having the right support and actually really doing it yourself for the first time I so relate to that with starting my executive coaching business, because who was I? Maybe I had my MBA and maybe I have my coaching certificate, but like, so what? Why is anybody going to use me over the gajillion coaches out there? So making sure to differentiate myself and figuring it all out myself. Of course, I felt like an imposter sometimes. So I completely relate to that.
And oh, sorry, John, I didn't want to cut you off, but
I was just going to jump in and echo the sentiment. I feel the same way, but go ahead, Courtney.
I'm just, everything that you're both sharing in, not only having like 2 decades of experience as an attorney, and still, like, I can walk into a deposition or a trial and have sort of this question, like, am I good enough? Or, are they going to figure out that, I'm not the real deal? Like, there's this little voice in our heads. We could be at the top of our game, but you mentioned, John, like, perspective, like, if we're so in our heads and we're not able to see the big picture, we can get in our own way. Fast forward to being a mindfulness teacher. I remember speaking to one of my teachers at Jefferson, and here I had taken the intensive training at Jefferson, teacher training, from the practicum to interning, to having taken the MBSR, which is the foundational mindfulness-based stress reduction program. I took it 6 times, and still thinking, am I good enough, to go and teach this to other people? So I think that we can have all of these qualifications, and deep down, we really do have the capacity and the ability and the training to excel further than the stars in the sky. But when we tell ourselves certain things, it can really work against us.
Yeah, Courtney, what you're saying really resonates with me. I would say, so I think it was the tail end of last year, I stumbled upon a book and by the name of, she's a clinical psychologist. She's trained at Boston University. Her name is
Yay!
Jill.
You.
Yeah, okay, great. So we have a connection there. A lot of connections in the Boston area with med device in specific, right? And so likewise, feeling the love there, Annie. But her name is Jill Stoddard. And, what I love about she wrote this book called Imposter No More. And it's something that when I stumbled across it, really resonated with me. This wasn't one of those fluffy, feel-good books where we're going to teach you to ignore the symptoms and all that kind of stuff, but it was really just a psychologist breaking it down and helping me understand. But I'm telling you, in her book, she talks about, there's 5 different forms of people that are that exhibit this imposter syndrome kind of thing. And Courtney, just listening to you talk, I suspected 2 of us, and maybe all 3 of us, are the expert class, right? Because
I'm looking at them right here, John. It's so funny that you know all of them. They're very
right.
interesting. I have them up on my screen.
Yeah, and I think for the listeners especially, this is an excellent book to think about if you want to learn and educate yourself more on this. But I will tell you this, the way that I have attempted to manage imposter syndrome over the years, very much similar to you, Courtney, is let me go become an expert at whatever it is that I felt like I wasn't an expert in. But it was never the solution, right? You can never fill that cup up.
Yeah.
And so you just have to, at some point, realize that what you have is enough. And you guys asked me some questions in the preparation of this podcast around coaching, right? And I know we'll probably touch on that later, but I did have a coach once upon a time that forced me to kind of reflect on the things I had accomplished and write them down. And then more importantly, keep a log of the things that I did accomplish as I was moving through my career, right? And so it's kind of this progression to help convince yourself really that, hey, you do have the substance, you can make this work, right? And so anyway,
John,
that's kind of,
I just did this with 2 clients. I'm talking about doctors, right? People in medicine that have done all kinds of schooling. They're experts in their right, and I actually just had imposter syndrome for 1 second in the opposite way. I was like, I'm doing this right because I assigned them that exact task. Here's your homework, and I'll see you next week. But I want you to write down your accomplishments. I don't care what they are, big and small. I want you to see it on a piece of paper because you're actually not realizing what you've done. Resumes are one thing, right? And a little bio is one thing, but look at what you've accomplished. And you just said that you had a coach that told you to do that. I was like, yes, I'm doing this
I
right.
think you guys are, ironically, this is a perfect topic, right? Because coaching is extremely important when it comes to people who are dealing with this on a deeper level, but also as mindfulness too. And if you think about the work that Jill's put out there, she very much folds in this whole mindfulness aspect to this whole thing. And so I resonate with that too. I think it's very important to kind of build in some of those activities so you can understand how to further reflect and course correct your life, if you will, or keep yourself on the track. Let's put it that way.
I like the idea that you're sharing, and I'm not sure if I think this may have come from what you wrote with Jill, and I know you mentioned it before we began taping the podcast about your habit of journaling, but this idea where rather than beating ourselves up for where we feel we fell short, or maybe we're not exactly where we want to be yet, like, but looking at the big picture, how far we've come. So when as you and Annie were agreeing, when we can put it down on paper and see, like, look how far we've come, and rather than having to beat ourselves up for what we feel like we haven't done, or maybe we didn't do exactly right, because I think a lot of this imposter syndrome can stem from people who tend to be perfectionists, like want to have everything just so. So when we let go of things having to be a certain way, not having to control everything, but just like step back and say, oh my gosh, look at all this goodness, look how much I've done, what I've accomplished. It's just, again, like that perspective, and you can be more gentle on yourself.
It reminds me of something that keeps coming up for me when you both are talking, is I talk about a ton in coaching executives. One-to-one is presence. Because if you are not present in the moment and you're worried about what you've done wrong in the past, or what you haven't done, or what's not good enough, or you're worried about the future in, I'm never going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be good enough, no one's going to think I'm good enough, you're not ever in the present. And when you can sit down and look at your accomplishments and who you really are and what makes you you, including what I always talk about, core values and the things that give you meaning and purpose in this life and the reasons that you're
Yeah.
here, that's when you're present, right? And that's what our goal is. We don't need to be stuck in the past or in the future, but most people are. So mindfulness is a great way to learn how to be present and in the present moment. Then you can really appreciate, and you get out of that space of, I'm not good enough, people are going to find me out, self-sabotage, all the things that many people do. So I'm not shaming anyone that does it, but there are ways to get past that.
Yeah, it's just listening to you talk, I'm making a couple notes here, and I'll keep referring back to Dr. Stoddard's book. She just so eloquently positioned so many things there. But I think, you all have kids, right? The two of you both are raising kids, right?
Lots
And
of
so,
them.
Lots of, yeah.
and so I think it's really important to look back in your life, and she talks about this in her book, it's important to look back in your life and kind of figure out where this seminal moment is that kind of drives a lot of what underpins your imposter syndrome, right? And so that really resonated with me. And so, we started talking off in this podcast about how I lost my parents early. And, a lot of this, in my humble opinion, but a lot of this, a lot of my own experience here has stemmed from a really, I think people reacting around me when I was at the very formative time point in my years, right? I lost my mom when I was 3, but by the time I had lost my dad, losing my mother was kind of normalized for me. And it happened at such a young age, 3. By the time I actually got into school, and you guys will think about this, when you're kindergartner or 5, 6 years old and you're going into those formative years, right? The experience with my mother had pretty much been absorbed at that point, right? But it's really, really when I lost my dad, when I was 11, right? And
Wow.
now I remember, school, like teachers cutting me a little extra slack, um, giving me heaps of praise for unnecessarily, right? And so it's these things that really kind of underpin how I feel about myself now. And it's, this marginalization, if you want to call it that, when you're early in life. And so you think about that with our kids, right? And I've got teenage boys now, and you witness it with other parents, right? You go to their sporting events and they're telling them, "Oh my gosh, you're so incredible. You did such a great job out there in the field," when all they did was kick the ball in a simple pass to their friend, right? And it's like at a very young age, I distinctly remember thinking to myself, you know, I didn't really deserve that.
That
You
can't
know,
be true. Yeah.
that can't be true, right? And so, in this I think is kind of informed where and how I've thought about myself over the course of my career, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like accepting praise and things like that when it's truly genuine, right? And so, I don't know. That was a lot to dump
No,
on
no,
you
no,
guys.
no. It brings up a lot for me. And particularly, it brings up what I think is probably a value of yours, which this word gets thrown around a lot, but it's really important. Because what you're basically saying is you just want people to be genuine when they're speaking to you and giving you praise and compliments. Like, just be real with me, so authenticity probably and transparency, not that they're not important to other people, but mean extra to you because you felt that at such core years of, is this real? Am I supposed to be getting this praise? Is she just cutting me slack because of my mom and dad? Those are the things that formed you. So that's why I'm feeling from you today that you're like, I just want people to be authentic.
Yes, very much so, right? And I think you know, you don't. It's just my humble opinion. Something else she talks about in her book is you really only experience imposter syndrome on the things that you care about the most, right? And I totally identify with that. I think that's perfect. Very, very true as it relates to my company and building this company, Liquet, right? It's deeply personal to me. I'm very passionate about solving these problems with blood clots for these individuals. How can we do better by these patients, by the physicians, right? And so, I take it a lot more seriously, right? And as a result of that, I have more of a sense of this. Am I able to actually do this? Can I accomplish this? And so, it's building these defense mechanisms using mindfulness, using good coaching, surrounding myself with people, the ecosystems that we've been a part of as an organization, really leaning into them to help us kind of understand and continue to move in the right direction. I'm very fortunate right now that we have one particular board member that we have on board that I really identify with, and has just been instrumental in terms of helping me just relax a bit in my own skin. And I think it's nice to have people like that in your lives, right? So anyway.
Things. So I'm probably going to forget the other one because whenever I do this, I'm like, what's number two? But the first one is there's a very fine line, John, between having imposter syndrome truly and am I having some self-doubt that can motivate me, right? So what I'm hearing you say is less, and we haven't talked long, but less imposter syndrome and more, I have self-doubt, which everyone has, right? And am I going to do, but continuing to do it, it's actually motivating you to keep going and to do well and to accomplish your tasks. So people need to understand that there's a difference. You don't just automatically have imposter syndrome because you don't think you can do it. There's sometimes self-doubt that's actually kind of good. And it motivates you to keep going and to do better and to be the best you, right? We can't really be better every day if we don't say to ourselves, can we be better? Maybe I can, maybe I can't. Oh, wait, yes, I can, right? So there's that fine line. And I, of course, forgot number two. Oh, number two was there's a control aspect there for you, right? Like what I'm hearing you say is like, I want it to be just so. And the person that helps you relax, that's really good. It's like you're just sort of loosening you don't have to throw the reins, but just loosen the reins a little bit sometimes, and it will work. That Courtney and I always talk about, like that muscle, to get back to a more mindful place where you can be present and actually enjoy this ride, because you're on the ride right now, right? And we always want to get to this destination. I was reading an article this morning. We want to get to when I get here, I will be accomplished. When I get here, I will not feel this anymore. When I get here, that will be success. You're already where you want to be. You're right here. Look how much you've done. Look at what you're doing. Look what in the now, right? So I'm going off on a tangent, but that's letting go a little bit of that control of having it be just so is not going to knock you down and have you not complete the task and get to the destination. You're at the destination. It's just going to help enjoy it.
I think that's a great distinction to make, and I'm recognizing the rock star in you, Annie. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Likewise, I between the two of you, I mean, like I feel like I'm sitting with two superheroes as we all speak here. But Annie, I love what you just said, because you were touching upon like when I get to point X, like I'm gonna be, living the best life. But what we can come to realize and appreciate with mindfulness is that in this very moment, no matter what we feel like isn't right or what's wrong with us or what we're still working towards, we can lean into the fact that we are intrinsically whole, just as we are right now. And I feel like, John, with what you've been working on and the coaches that have supported you, the community and mindfulness, that you're able to really feel into that. But if you looked at my paper here, my paper looks like some type of game. I have stuff written all over the place because so many things of what you've shared, right, just in the 20 or so minutes that we've been talking, I have so much interest. But what I really want to give a lot of weight to is the fact that you're so willing to be vulnerable with what you've gone through. I mean, to lose a parent at 3 years old, a parent at 11 years old, combined, the two of them, I mean, I can feel it within my heart, and I didn't experience that directly. So I just want to acknowledge what you're giving a voice and how it's not easy to explore that, like where you are now. And it's because you care, like you're so passionate about the product that you're launching and the business that you're running, that you're willing to go back into the past to a time that can be really challenging. And that is not for the faint of heart. Like with mindfulness, we sort of say, with a light of mindfulness, like, let's just sort of explore what's here, because our past, sometimes when it's not pleasant, it's difficult and challenging, we can stuff it down. But when we can gently explore it with a sense of curiosity and learn and grow from it, then, that's going to help us to really excel in both our personal and professional lives. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, like, for you giving that a voice, willing to share that with us and go there. And then the next layer is that, in turn, that you're able to not only be with what can feel incredibly challenging, what was challenging, but what can be challenging, like in the moment, but then find ways to incline yourself in the direction of relaxation. That when we can sort of, be with what John Kabat-Zinn often refers to as the full catastrophe, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then find ways to lean into ease. Like that's really incredible work. And it's just a testament, I think, to how much this device, how much your work means to you, and all those people that you really want to help. So I'm bowing down to you over here.
I just want to add one thing. Courtney speaks so eloquently that, like, I feel like I just jibber jabber, but maybe that's the imposter syndrome in me, right? I'm like, God, she says everything so eloquently, and I kind of just talk. But what I was going to say was, John, like, not to like embarrass you, but one more thing to add to what Courtney said is, to me, in my brain, I see this fork in your road. You came to it much earlier than most, but you got to the fork and you had two choices: bury it and live your life with it buried, or deal with it later, or deal with it. Yeah. And you chose for whatever reason, or your strength, I think, brought you to choose the face it way. And that's why there's no other way. I can't see another path. There's only that fork. There's bury it. And that's much, not harder, but you got a lot to deal with down the road. It's what people do, like face it later or never face it at all. And you just faced it. And that's what the strength is, in your ability to overcome some of this and to allow in the coaching, the mindfulness, the relaxation. Because if you had buried it, the more and more you go, the more buried it is, the more things you bury, you can't let that in.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there was probably, I kind of felt like a normal teenager at some point, right? So there probably was a little bit of burying it going on there, to be truthful.
I mean, that was your normal though, John. That was your normal. Like,
true.
It stinks that it happened, but as you said, normalized before, like, that's all you knew.
That's right.
So was it really, I don't think as a kid, you can't really face it. You faced stuff later with
Yeah,
strength.
I think you come
Did
into
what you
this sense of awareness, right? Yeah. And as I think I got older, I started to pick at what is this awareness, right? And then you come to kind of understand it better. I think has been the progression for me. So yeah,
So
thank
I
you
have
for
a
that. I
question.
appreciate
So how do you weave? Tell me about your coaching experience, and I'm
it. Yeah.
interested to know your mindfulness experience. How do you weave either of those into your life, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I would say, from a coaching perspective, I'm opportunistic. And so I wouldn't say that I have this scheduled regimen of coaching on a consistent basis, right? It's very opportunistic for me. Like when I feel like I need or have a need, that's when I reach out and connect and try and get some assistance, that kind of guidance, that kind of thing. It's nice to have multiple people that I think of as coaches, if you will. Maybe they're more mentors. I don't know. You're a better judge of that than I am, certainly. But I've learned a lot just plugging into your podcast, frankly. And as it relates to mindfulness in many ways. My exercise of mindfulness on a daily basis, I would say, was very rudimentary until I started really understanding a little bit more about, well, what is it really, right? Um, Taking a closer look at things and appreciation for what they are and what they mean to your life in general, and et cetera. And that's just a very surface level of understanding in my mind. And so I'm trying to get better at that too. And so I think this is just a work in progress for me on both fronts, both from a coaching and a mindfulness setting.
We're all works in progress. So
Yeah.
just so you understand, I work with a framework, and I don't have to get into it now. I've talked about it before. It's called the breath framework. And I told Courtney this, I think. H, breath, stands for heal, but it doesn't stand for healed. And there's a reason for that, right? It could be healed. I made it in my acronym, I made it heal or healing, because we are all works in progress, and we all continue to evolve if we choose to do the work, right? So we're never, I don't want to say never healed, but anytime I heal something in me, I want to move on and heal something else. So I want to always be the best version of me. So to your point, you weave this into your life, but you want to learn more. You're a sponge. That's what makes you special, right? And so
Yeah.
strong is that you always want to do better and be better and learn more. And so to put an exclamation point on your point, you are weaving it in, but you're still going to try to do it better and learn more, I should say.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
And mindfulness, we call it mindfulness practice because it's exactly what it is. It's innate. The ability to be aware in the present is very much innate. It's here with us, but we're so easily pulled to our to-do list or giving ourselves a hard time for something in the past or judging what's here in the moment, that with practice is what allows us to keep coming back to this present moment and to, as much as possible, be kind, compassionate, curious, open. So it really is a practice, and the more and more we practice, we go back to this muscle that Annie and I refer to a lot in our podcast, but that's what strengthens the ability of our minds to be in the here and now.
That makes perfect sense to me. I'm pretty routine with my morning mindfulness routine. I shared with you the whole corpse pose thing. Sometimes in the afternoon,
I
I'll
love the
count.
corpse pose. It's my favorite thing in yoga because I could just lay there.
Is there anything more relaxing in this whole world? It's
No,
crazy.
I would be like, if this is yoga, this is perfect for me. You could just lay there. You don't have to it's perfect.
What's
Could not
your
agree more.
John, what is your morning routine with regards to corpse pose or
So the corpse pose is an afternoon technique for me.
afternoon?
The
Okay.
morning routine is very much I'm going to take some time personally for myself. I like to get up early. Um, you know, uh, in the past, I used to be a very competitive cyclist. And on the bike, my mind was always free to wander and kind of adjust and calibrate and stuff like that, right? And so I still ride a lot today, and I use it from that perspective. And I think about my morning routine the same way, right? Get my coffee, go onto the back porch and sit in nature, like forest bathe, if you will. Some people call it bathing in
I
the
like
woods or
that. I've
whatever.
never
I
heard
don't know.
that. I love that.
Yeah. And so, but I'll do that, right? And I take a notebook out there. The notebook has really served the purpose for me to kind of clear my brain so that I don't feel like I have to think about anything specifically, right? And Courtney, I've heard you talk about this in some of your instruction, right? Recognize that it's there. Don't push it out necessarily, but just recognize that it's there and then kind of move on. And so I'm getting better. I'm listening. I'm learning.
You are.
But yeah,
You're
that's
doing
how I
great.
think about it.
What you're doing is amazing. I love forest bathing. I can totally do that. I live like in the middle of the forest and I'm going to forest bathe later, I think.
I
It's
love
like,
it. Yeah.
it's so
I will tell you a
relaxing.
little, I'll tell you a little story quickly about my wife and I. We, as a condition of marriage, my wife told me that I will have to ride my bike around the world with her. And so in 1999, when we got married, 3 years prior to that, well, in 1999, we packed all of our stuff into the basement of one of my buddies, and we literally rode our bikes through 57 some odd countries over the course of the next 3.5, almost 4 years. And so that was a lot of time to reflect on life, where we are, what we've done, just, unplug from the corporate scene in many ways, right? And just really get grounded on so many levels and understand that you can survive on practically nothing
Nothing.
and your own will, you know what I mean? Power to get from one place to another, right? And
Amazing.
and so that was a very centering thing for me. And I try to think about that sometimes too, because it's like that experience on the open road, even though my wife is with me at the time, but it's a lot of that, talk about forest bathing, some of the most significant things were just that alone time and being out in nature. So anyway,
It's
I thought I
amazing.
would share that with you.
Wow.
When you think about a life of simplicity, I mean, yeah, we can all do it, but many of us choose not to do it. And that's incredible that you kind of vowed that to each other and then you did it. There was no
Yeah.
cycling or biking in my vows. I can tell you that. And that there was
I
no
have
like
my
make sure
wife.
we exercise.
Yeah.
None of that was in my vows. So I'm super proud that not only you said that to each other, but that you did it. And to bring yourselves to the present moment, that's the best way to, and together, like you said, I know we were
Yeah.
together.
Oh,
I
Annie,
love that piece of it. I
if you
love
can
that
live with
piece.
if you can live with your wife in a tent for 4 years, you will be forever married to that person.
My gosh,
I'm
yeah,
in total awe here, not only
yeah,
from your accomplishments on the
totally.
professional end, but now hearing like
Personally, what you've
this
done.
commitment and what you accomplished. I'm in total awe over
If you
here.
have imposter syndrome ever, I need you to take my cell phone number and I need you to text me right away because you need a coaching program if that's how you feel. You have done so much, John. You're amazing and layered and like such a calming force. And you said that we have similar personalities, but I find you to be very calming and like the cadence of what you're talking about and,
Yeah.
beautifully like woven in who you are into our podcast, which some might say, maybe the two don't even really go together, but they do. Like you were
Yeah.
really great at sort of doing one of your first podcasts and explaining who you are, but what you're doing and your goals and what you've done. I think you're incredible. I'm really excited to have met you today.
Well, thank you for that.
Likewise.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hugely inspired today. Like I
Oh,
may
I have
have
one
to
thing
get
I
the
want to say. No, Annie, you have a million things that you want to say, and you're always interrupting. So if anyone wants, last time we talked about when you sort of interviewed me, Court, you said something like, "All right, so how can somebody out there that's never practiced, gratitude? What's a quick thing they can do?" And I gave like sort of a little assignment what you can do. So if you don't know it, go back and listen to the podcast. But this is an assignment for everybody listening to if you want to do something quick that you want to apply some of the things we've talked about today, take a notebook and sit and write. This is from your words, Courtney. In this very moment, and I'm going to add, I am blank, and write that 5 times or 10 times. In this very moment, I am. And if you do that, it will bring you to this very moment and you will think about who you are, what you're doing, why you're there. And maybe you'll just be for a minute, which is really my goal all the time. Can I just sit and be? Just be. So I challenge listeners to kind of try that and then write us, an email or a LinkedIn message and let us know how it worked for you. I'd love to hear.
I
That's
love that.
awesome.
And just from the mindfulness angle, whatever you write down as much as possible, not judging that because
No.
just what's here in the moment. And as John's so perfectly described for us, like we can be with all that is challenging sometimes in life and still open to all the beauty that's here. So John, thank you so much. What a joy it's been to have you on our show.
It went so fast. It went so fast.
It did. It did. I do want to give
Yeah.
listeners an opportunity if they'd like to reach out to you to learn more about all of the incredible things you've done, all the incredible work you're doing. If they want to find out more about how they can support the Versus Catheter that you've developed and learn more about Liquet, how's best for them to reach out to you?
Well, so you can find me on LinkedIn easily. It's John Schindler, like Schindler's List. It's the easiest way to remember how to spell my last name. And as far as the company's concerned, if you're curious and want to learn more, you can look at our website. It is Liquet, Liquet, medical.com. And so thanks for the plug, Courtney, Annie. I appreciate that.
Of course. Yeah. I'm connecting with you right now because I have to do it right in the moment or it doesn't get done. And so I'm super excited to, hang out with you again and learn more and, bring you back at some point and see what else you're doing and any other trips around the world you and your wife have decided to take with just you two on a bike. Anything you want to talk about, I'm interested in.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for having me today, both of you. Super, super generous with your time.
Thank you. This has been a gift on so many levels. So thanks again, John. Take the best of care, and I'm really excited for what is about to unfold for you in so many ways. Thank you.
You bet.
I'm
Thanks.
going to stay on when you press stop. So I'm going to stay on and talk to you, both of you. So stay. Okay.
Okay.